On the morning of May 6, 1996, Sherri Dally locked the doors of her daycare center and stepped into the parking lot. It was supposed to be just another normal day. She had dropped off their children. Plans had been made. Life was moving forward. And then, a car quietly pulled up beside her van. Inside was a blonde woman, neatly dressed, calm, confident. The woman leaned out of her window and flashed a badge. "Police," she said. Before Sherri could even process what was happening, cold metal snapped around her wrists. Handcuffs. People were walking nearby. Cars passed only a few feet away. Nothing about this looked like a crime, so Sherri didn't fight. She believed she was being arrested. What she didn't know was that the badge was fake, and the woman was not a police officer. Sherri Dally was being kidnapped in broad daylight. As the car pulled away, Sherri asked what she had done. The blonde woman didn't answer. The road stretched ahead, empty, silent. Every mile they drove, Sherri was moving farther from her family and closer to something far worse. Because she wasn't being taken to jail, she was being taken to die. When Sherri didn't come home, panic set in. Her daycare never reopened. Her family called the police. A massive search began, but nothing made sense. There were no witnesses, no struggle, no sign of where she went until investigators learned about the mysterious blonde woman. They traced her. They went to her home. And when police knocked on the door, a man walked out of a back bedroom. He was wearing nothing but boxer shorts. That man was Mike Dally, Sherri's husband. The same man who had been begging on television for his wife's return was now standing in another woman's bedroom while his wife was missing. In that moment, the case turned from a kidnapping into a betrayal. Because suddenly the question wasn't just who took Sherri, it became who wanted her gone, and how far would they go to make sure she never came back. This wasn't a random crime. It was a plan, a fake arrest, a stolen identity, and a lie so carefully built it fooled everyone, until it didn't. Sherri trusted a badge. She trusted a stranger. And she trusted the life she thought she had. But in one quiet parking lot, everything was taken from her. And what really happened next is more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Stay with me. Hello, I'm Axel, and this is UnionX Crime. On this channel, we go beyond headlines and into the real stories behind some of the most disturbing crimes ever committed. Today's documentary takes us into a case that shocked an entire community. The disappearance of a loving mother, a trusted daycare owner, and a woman who thought she was being helped when she was actually being led into a trap. This is the story of Sherri Dally, a case filled with deception, betrayal, and a truth that took years to fully come to light. So stay with me as we uncover what really happened and why this case still leaves so many unanswered questions. This is UnionX Crime. When people talk about Sherri Dally, the first thing they always mention is how much she loved kids. From the time she was little, Sherri dreamed about being a mom, having a family, and building a warm, happy home. Her mother once described her as spunky, someone who loved babies, animals, and just being around people. Sherri had that kind of personality that made others feel comfortable right away. In high school, Sherri met a boy named Michael Dally, or Mike, as everyone called him. He was handsome, popular, and full of confidence. And from the start, he knew how to make Sherri feel special. He was the type of guy who loved big romantic gestures. On her 18th birthday, he sent her 17 red roses, then showed up in person with one more in his hand. To Sherri, it felt like something straight out of a love story. Not long after, they got married. They were young, but they were sure. Sherri was finally living the life she had always imagined. A husband, a home, and soon 2 little boys. While Mike worked full-time at a grocery store, Sherri ran a daycare out of their home in Ventura. Every day, parents trusted her with their children, and she took that responsibility seriously. She wasn't just watching them. She cared for them, loved them, and made them feel safe. One parent later said it was a real blessing to have their kids in Sherri's care. And that's how most people in town saw her: kind, dependable, and warm. Sherri wasn't just a daycare provider. She was a friend, someone you trusted. From the outside, the Dally family looked happy. They had a steady routine, 2 growing boys, and a busy house filled with noise and life. But sometimes what things look like from the outside isn't the full story. Behind the scenes, the marriage was slowly changing. The romance faded, the connection grew weaker, and little by little, distance started to take the place of love. Still, Sherri held on. She believed in family. She believed in keeping things together. And most of all, she believed in the life she had built. What she didn't know was that while she was caring for everyone else, something was quietly shifting in her own world. A person she trusted was drifting away, and another was stepping into her life. Someone who would soon play a role in one of the most shocking betrayals Ventura had ever seen. Because this story isn't just about a crime, it's about trust, it's about love, and it's about how someone who believed in happy endings was about to walk into a nightmare she never saw coming. And the morning everything changed was only just around the corner. Some days don't feel important when they begin. They feel normal, quiet, routine. The morning of May 6, 1996 was one of those days. Sherri Dally woke up, got her 2 young sons ready for school, and kissed them goodbye, just like she always did. She drove them to class, waved as they walked inside, and then turned her car toward Target to run a few errands. It was a Monday, and Mondays were part of her routine. Inside the store, Sherri looked relaxed. Surveillance cameras showed her browsing the aisles, paying at the register, and walking out with her shopping bags at around 9:22 a.m. Nothing about her movements suggested fear. Nothing suggested urgency. She walked into the parking lot, and that was the last moment she would ever be seen alive. Witnesses later told police they saw a blonde woman pull up beside Sherri's van. The woman stepped out of her car, showed what looked like a police badge, and told Sherri she was under arrest. Then right there in front of people walking by, she placed handcuffs on Sherri's wrists. No one stopped it because it looked real. Sherri didn't scream. She didn't resist. She believed she was being taken by a police officer. The woman guided her into another car and drove away. And just like that, Sherri Dally disappeared. By that afternoon, something was clearly wrong. Sherri never came to pick up her sons from school. That had never happened before. Her husband, Mike Dally, began making phone calls to hospitals, to the highway patrol, to anyone who might have seen her. Finally, he called the Ventura Police Department. In a recorded call, he said, "My wife dropped my boys off at school at 8:30 this morning. She's been missing since. I've called the hospitals. I've called the highway patrol. She's gone." Police immediately began searching. It didn't take long for Mike's family to find something disturbing. Sherri's large 15-passenger van was still parked at Target, unlocked. Inside were her keys, her ID, and a gift she had just bought for her mother. Everything she would need to leave, and nothing that explained why she did. The case was assigned to detectives Matt Harville and Sean Conroy. For Harville, this wasn't just another investigation. He knew Sherri. He had gone to high school with her. He remembered her smile, her kindness, her voice. Later, he would say that this case felt different because Sherri wasn't just a name on a report. She was someone he could picture, someone real. The more detectives looked at what happened in that parking lot, the more unsettling it became. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This wasn't random. Someone knew where Sherri would be. Someone knew her routine. Someone had planned it. A fake badge, handcuffs. A woman who looked official enough to convince everyone, even Sherri herself. This was a carefully staged abduction. And when something is that carefully planned, it almost always leads back to someone close, which meant investigators had to take a hard look at the person who knew Sherri best. Her husband. Mike had been the one to call police. He had been the one asking for help. But detectives had to ask themselves a difficult question. What did Mike really know about his wife's last morning? Because Sherri hadn't just vanished. She had been taken, and whoever did it knew exactly when and where to find her. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a betrayal, a deception, and a crime that would slowly expose a truth far darker than anyone in Ventura was ready to face. And as investigators kept digging, they would uncover a story that began with trust and ended with something no one could ever forget. When detectives Matt Harville and Sean Conroy arrived at the Dally family home, they were expecting to find a husband desperately waiting for news. Mike Dally told them he had been at work when his wife disappeared. He said he had no idea where Sherri was. And later, his employer confirmed that he really had been on the clock that morning. At first, Mike insisted his marriage was solid. But as the conversation continued, the story began to change. He admitted he was having an affair, a girlfriend from work. Her name, he said, was Diana. He claimed he didn't know her last name or even where she lived, only that they worked together at Vaughn's and that he had her phone number. That was all detectives needed. They quickly identified the woman as Diana Hahn and drove to her home in Port Hueneme. When Diana opened the door, she was wearing a short black negligee, and standing behind her, walking out of a bedroom, was Mike, wearing nothing but boxer shorts. At the exact moment his wife was missing, the man who said he was waiting for the phone to ring was spending the night with his mistress. Detective Sean Conroy would later say it was one of the most disturbing moments of the case. Mike was supposed to be hoping his wife was alive. Instead, he was in another woman's bed. As investigators dug deeper, they learned that Sherri already knew about the affair. One of her closest friends, Debbie English, remembered the day Sherri came to her in tears. She said Sherri was heartbroken when she found out, and Debbie just held her while she cried. But even after that betrayal, Sherri didn't give up. She still wanted her family. She even confronted Diana and told her clearly, "You're not getting my husband, and you're not getting my kids." After Mike and Diana were brought to the police station, Diana tried to explain her day away. She said she had gone on a long bike ride, but detectives noticed scratches on her head. When they asked about them, Diana claimed she had fallen. It didn't sit right, especially since witnesses had described the woman who took Sherri as blonde, and Diana had long, dark hair. But the lies were starting to pile up, and the truth was getting closer, because whoever had taken Sherri that morning hadn't been wearing a uniform. They were wearing a disguise, and someone very close to her knew exactly how that disguise would work. As detectives continued their investigation, one thing became clear very quickly. Whatever happened to Sherri Dally, it was not a real police arrest. No department in Ventura County had any record of taking her into custody. No officer had logged her name. No patrol unit had reported a stop. It was as if the arrest had never happened at all, and yet witnesses were certain. They had seen a woman flash a badge. They had seen handcuffs. They had watched Sherri being led away. That could only mean one thing. The arrest was staged. Someone had pretended to be law enforcement, just long enough to get Sherri into a car. Detectives also noticed something else. The woman wasn't driving a police vehicle. Witnesses described the car as a teal-colored sedan. In that area, most police officers drove black and white Ford Crown Victorias, and officers almost never made an arrest alone, without a partner. But this woman was by herself, in a civilian car. Nothing about it made sense, and that was the point, because this wasn't about following procedure. It was about creating just enough authority to make Sherri comply. Fear might make someone fight back, but a badge makes people obey. Sherri trusted what she saw, and in doing so, she walked straight into a trap. Now detectives were searching for a ghost, a woman who wasn't a cop, a car that didn't belong to any department, and a crime that had been hidden behind a lie. And as they dug deeper, one thing became more and more clear. This wasn't a random abduction. This was something far more personal, because someone knew exactly how to reach Sherri, and exactly how to make her believe she had no choice. Detectives had one lead they could finally follow: a teal sedan. Witnesses had seen it in the Target parking lot the morning Sherri disappeared. So investigators began calling every rental car company in the area, hoping someone had rented a vehicle that matched the description. Before long, they found one. A teal Nissan Altima had been rented out around the same time Sherri vanished. When the car was returned, employees noticed something strange. The rear-view mirror was missing, and under the floor mat in the back seat, there was a large brownish stain that looked like blood. Police took the car apart. When they cut open the seat cushions, they found even more blood inside. And mixed with it were long, synthetic blonde hairs. Someone had been in that back seat, someone who had struggled, and someone who had bled. The rental paperwork listed the woman who had rented the car. It was Diana Hahn, Mike Dally's girlfriend. When detectives confronted Diana, she insisted the car wasn't hers, but the evidence kept piling up. During a search of her purse, police found something that made everything feel even more disturbing: a photograph. It showed Diana standing next to Mike, with Sherri's 2 young sons. A family photo. The woman who claimed she barely knew Mike was carrying around a picture of his children. That was enough. Detectives placed Diana Hahn under arrest. As they continued digging into her past, co-workers from Vons began coming forward. They told police Diana talked openly about witchcraft and strange rituals. Some said that just weeks before Sherri disappeared, Diana talked about making a human sacrifice for a friend whose birthday was coming up. Mike's birthday had been only weeks away. The case was no longer just about jealousy. It was about obsession. Before Diana was taken to jail, police allowed her to speak to Mike one last time. Detectives watched as he walked in, kissed her, and stroked her hair. He told her police couldn't hold her unless they had real solid evidence. And he reminded her that Sherri was still just missing, not dead. Detective Matt Harville later said it was strange to watch. Diana looked almost like she was in a trance, as if Mike was steadying her, focusing her, keeping her calm. But outside that room, the truth was closing in. There was blood in the car, hair in the seat, a girlfriend who lied, and a husband who knew far more than he was letting on. Sherri Dally hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken, and the people closest to her were standing right in the middle of the crime. For weeks after Sherri disappeared, investigators were stuck in a terrible place. They had blood in a rental car, they had lies, they had a fake arrest, but they didn't have Sherri. And without a body, the district attorney didn't believe there was enough to hold Diana Hahn. So she was released. And just like that, the woman many believed was involved walked free. Sherri, meanwhile, was still missing. Her family kept waiting, her children kept hoping, and her friends refused to give up. One of those friends was Kristen Best. Sherri had cared for Kristen's kids, and Kristen felt a deep connection to her. So she joined a group of volunteers who spent their days searching through Ventura County, along roads, through hills, anywhere a person might have been left behind. On June 1st, 1996, Kristen and her group were driving along a quiet stretch of road when something caught her eye. She asked them to stop. She stepped out of the car, and there on the ground were a pair of sunglasses. "I knew they were her sunglasses," Kristen would later say. In that moment, everything changed. The glasses were lying near a steep ravine. A few of the men climbed down, carefully making their way through the brush. Not far below, they saw something else. A pair of black shorts, the same kind Sherri had been wearing the day she vanished. They called the police, and soon after, Sherri Dally was found. Her skeletal remains were recovered from the ravine. It was heartbreaking, but it was also the truth. Sherri was no longer missing. She had been taken from this world. For her family, the pain was overwhelming, but now at least they had answers. They could finally bring her home, and investigators finally had what they needed to move forward. Because the silence was over, and the truth, no matter how painful, had finally been found. You know, when investigators finally learned what happened to Sherri, it was heartbreaking, but it was also powerful because it showed something important. Sherri didn't just disappear, she fought. The medical examiner determined that before she died, Sherri had been beaten and stabbed. That meant she was alive, aware, and struggling in her final moments. And then something else came to light. A woman who worked at a wig shop came forward and told police that just days before Sherri vanished, she had sold a blonde wig to Diana Hahn. That one detail changed everything. Suddenly, the strange scene in the Target parking lot made sense. The blonde woman, the badge, the handcuffs. Diana hadn't just shown up that day, she had prepared. Detectives believe she used the wig and makeup to hide who she was, so Sherri wouldn't recognize her right away. And at first, it worked. But once Sherri was in the car, something changed. She realized who was sitting beside her. And when that happened, Sherri didn't freeze. She fought. Somehow she managed to pull her handcuffs in front of her and strike back. The scratches on Diana's forehead, the ones she claimed came from a bike fall, were actually from Sherri trying to save herself. Detective Conroy later said it best. Sherri Dally bravely fought for her life and fought for her family, and that's exactly what she did. Investigators believe Diana had to pull the car over into a parking lot because Sherri was resisting so fiercely. And there, inside that vehicle, Sherri was attacked, beaten, and stabbed. The same car that later showed blood under the seat, the same car that had her hair, the same car Diana tried to deny ever using. This time, the truth couldn't be ignored. The wig, the blood, the injuries, the medical findings, all of it finally came together. There was now enough evidence to charge Diana Hahn with murder. But this case wasn't over, because Diana wasn't the only one who played a role in what happened to Sherri. Someone else had helped plan it. Someone else had everything to gain. And that story was just beginning. You know, from the outside, Sherri Dally's life looked just about perfect. She had the family she always wanted, a husband, 2 little boys, and a home full of kids who loved her. But behind that picture-perfect life, something very different was happening. Friends would later tell police that in the months before Sherri died, Mike wasn't just having an affair. He was emotionally torturing her. He would taunt her about Diana. He even put a pillow with Diana's photo on it right in Sherri's bed. And on Christmas Day, instead of being with his wife, he took their sons to spend the holiday with the woman he was cheating with. Detective Matt Harville later said it best. The marriage wasn't just unhappy, it was emotionally abusive. Sherri would wake up at 2 in the morning just to warm Mike's shower water. Not because she wanted to, but because she felt like she had to. She wasn't being treated like a partner anymore. She was being treated like someone who didn't matter. And detectives began to realize something even more disturbing. They believed Mike had helped set Sherri up. He knew her routine. He knew where she would be that morning. And he shared that information with Diana. While Sherri was running errands, Mike was quietly helping someone else plan her disappearance. Then more people came forward. They said Mike had a secret life, selling drugs, sleeping with sex workers, carrying on multiple affairs. One woman even told police that while Sherri was missing, Mike drove her to a remote hillside, the same place where Sherri's body would later be found, and had sex with her there. Another former co-worker told police something even more chilling, that Mike had once asked her to kill Sherri. That's when everything became clear. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of jealousy. It was something much darker. In November of 1996, Mike Dally was arrested for his wife's murder. Diana was already facing charges, and in court, her lawyers tried to blame Mike. But the jury saw the truth. Diana was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy, and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Mike was convicted in his own trial, and he was also sentenced to life behind bars, no parole, no second chance. Sherri didn't get the future she dreamed of, but she didn't disappear without a voice. Through her courage, through the evidence she left behind. The people who betrayed her were finally held accountable, and that is how Sherri Dally finally got justice. When I think about Sherri Dally's story, what stands out most is her bravery. She fought for her family, even when the people she trusted most betrayed her. It's heartbreaking to see the abuse and manipulation she endured, but her courage shines through. And in the end, justice was served. Both Diana Hahn and Mike Dally were held accountable for their crimes, showing that the truth, no matter how dark, eventually comes to light. Sherri's story is a reminder to stay aware, protect the people we love, and never ignore the warning signs of betrayal or abuse. If this story moved you, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And for more real-life cases that uncover hidden truths and lessons, subscribe to UnionX Crime, because even in darkness, courage and truth can shine, just like Sherri did.